Hello, friends. Ken Graves here with GodSword. And today, I trust your Lord's Day was good. For me, it's Monday. I don't know what day it is for you, and how you're following along on this journey. But it's Monday here, so that means yesterday was the Lord's Day, and it was a great Lord's Day. Habakkuk chapter 2. It was a great weekend, amazing weekend. If there's any of you guys watching now that were part of the Men's Warrior Summit at Brave Church in Denver, and that was a good time. That was a great gathering of men, and a great pastor, Pastor Jeff there, and all of those that he had invited. They were all a blessing. I only wish I could have stayed and listened to everybody. They're dear brothers to fellowship with. Okay. Second chapter of Habakkuk. Habakkuk's mind was already blown in chapter 1 by the fact that there's all this injustice, all this wickedness in his nation, and he wondered if God was going to do something about it. And when the Lord informs him that he's going to actually be raising up the Chaldeans, the Babylonian Empire, the Babylonians would come and they would be God's tool of judgment. And so in chapter 1, Habakkuk struggles with, God, why would you use them? They're so wicked. And God, he continues to actually answer his prophet, Habakkuk. In chapter 2, Habakkuk says in verse 1, I will stand on my guard post and station myself on the fortification. And I'll keep watch to see what he will speak to me and how I may respond when I am reproved. And Yahweh answered me and said, so Habakkuk expects reproof, and he sets himself up for it in the sense that as God's watchman, he sees himself on the very watchtower, up on the guard post, and stationed as he was, figuratively speaking, on the fortification, and giving, like a watchman, watching for a coming messenger. Habakkuk says, I'm watching for what he, that's capitalized rightly, what Yahweh will say to me. And then how will I respond? And that is exactly what we should concern ourselves with. What is it that Yahweh says, and how should we respond? And there's a difference between responding and reacting. We do too much of that, reacting. But to respond, to be deliberate, to think through the very thing that we are then going to respond to. We react, we don't think. When we merely react, well, it's just so usually wrong. Our reactions are not as good as our responses. So consider the difference. And Habakkuk is deliberate in his plan to both listen and to respond to Yahweh. Verse 2, then Yahweh answered me and said, he answered me and said, write down the vision and write it on tablets distinctly, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It pants toward its end, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come. It will not delay. So, the command of Yahweh to Habakkuk is, write it down. But he says, write it down, and on tablets distinctly. Write it down distinctly. Write it down so it can be read. So You've got to make it understandable, the truth of God. And he said that the one who reads it may run, so that the reader can immediately process what you have written and immediately apply it, take action on it. But then Yahweh informs him that this vision is for yet an appointed time. It's not for the sort of now of what Habakkuk is dealing with, but it's for an appointed time. And even if it tarries, wait for it. It certainly will come. Certainly. There's a certainty about what God says. And then he begins this contrast. In verse 4, behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. So the contrast here between the proud one and the just, or, as the King James Version, or the righteous one. There's a contrast between the really proud and the righteous, because they're not the same. You cannot be both proud and righteous. So with that, the subtle and indirect implication that righteousness is humble and godlessness is prideful. Behold the proud one. His soul is not right within him, but the just or the righteous will live by faith. Now he goes on to talk at length about the proud one. And in some sense, he is speaking about a nation, and it is the Chaldeans. It is the Babylonian Empire. There, in one sense, what Yahweh speaks of is a nation, but in yet another sense, he speaks of its king. We'll get acquainted with him, King Nebuchadnezzar. Truly, he is the proud one. And Yahweh will humble him on more than one occasion. Indeed, wine betrays the haughty man, so his pride is connected to his haughtiness. But the statement that wine betrays the haughty man, so that he does not stay at home. He enlarges his appetite like Sheol. He is like death never satisfied. He also gathers to himself all nations and assembles to himself all peoples. So the proud one, both the nation and its king, deceived by wine. The statement, wine betrays the haughty man. Wine betrays him. You think that it's doing something good for you and your haughtiness, but you will ultimately discover that wine betrays. It does not serve you. It betrays you. Here also, it betrays the haughty man so that he does not stay at home. So he is deceived. There are many things you can get drunk on. You can get drunk on people's praise. You can get drunk on this lust for power. He does not stay at home. He doesn't maintain his borders, as it were. Instead, he enlarges his appetite like Sheol, like hell itself, that is never satisfied, even though he gathers all nations, conquering and assembling all these peoples. The statement that Yahweh makes to Habakkuk is, will not all of these lift up a taunt song against him, even satire and riddles against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his? And for how long? And so that's a reality. For how long? That kind of wealth is short-lived. For how long? And makes himself rich with loans. Well, not yours. There's a ultimate payday. It may be, make no payments for months or no payment until 2026. But still, the word until implies that eventually payment has to be made. Well, not your creditors rise up suddenly. And those who make you tremble awaken. Indeed, you'll become spoil for them, because you've taken many nations as spoil. All that is left of the peoples will take you as spoil. Because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town and all its inhabitants. In other words, you, conquering nation, will likewise be conquered, and all that you've done as a nation will be done to you. All you've done as a king will ultimately be done to you. Woe to him who is greedy for evil gain, for his house, to put his nest on high, to be delivered from the hand of evil. You've counseled a shameful thing for your house by cutting off many peoples. So you are sinning against your own soul. Surely the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer it from the framework. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with injustice. So it's all going to come back. And this is God informing the prophet Habakkuk that all of Babylon's evil will come back on it. And this, that even the house you build, in your greed, your greedy, evil heart, it all comes back on you. That even the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer it from the framework. Woe! And so these woes are pronounced. Let's consider these. First is woe to him that is greedy, and then let's see in verse 12. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed. So the second one is woe to the violent. And he founds a town with injustice. So he's violent and unjust. Is it not, behold, from Yahweh of hosts, that peoples toil for fire, and nations grow weary for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh, as the waters cover the sea. Now, I want to just pause for a minute on that. That's a beautiful statement, and I've many times wept at even the thought of it. I consider the world that we live in now and the ignorance and rebellion of humanity against God. I think of the lack of knowing the Lord. And, we're in the business of trying to do something about that, but there is a time, there will come a day when these words that Yahweh spoke to the prophet, through the prophet Habakkuk, will be fulfilled. Where the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh. Or as the King James Version has it, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. As the waters cover the sea, can you imagine it? Have you ever thought such a wonderful thought that the whole world will know the Lord, their Creator? The whole world will be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh. The whole world. There is a time when there will be no ignorance of Him. The third woe, verse 15, woe to you who make your neighbors drink, who mix in your venom, even to make them drunk. And that is exactly, I submit to you that is exactly how Yahweh sees alcohol, venom. It's a poison. It is a poison. You can drink a lot of water. You can actually drink yourself to a place of being not well. It's true. You can drink a lot of milk. Certainly, it's true. A person can drink too much milk. You can drink a lot of various fruit juices, an excessive amount of it, and find that you've drunk so much of it that it's not good for you, but it won't kill you. Alcohol is a poison. It is a toxin. It has that in common with venom. A little and a person feels a slight euphoria. A little more, and it's even more extreme, but then along with it is significant brain dysfunction and more alcohol beyond that point, and the drunkard becomes unconscious. He passes out. They black out. Why does this progression happen? Because it's a poison. It's a toxin. And ultimately, beyond that point of being so poisoned that one blacks out, well, the next stage is death, alcohol poisoning. Well, I think every stage, in my opinion, is alcohol poisoning. Anyway, the first woe is against the greedy. The second woe is against the violent and unjust. The third woe is against the drunkards. And not just that, but those who, as he says here, make your neighbors to drink. If the Son of God would say, as he did, there will always be temptation in the world, but woe to the tempter. Imagine how much heavier a judgment comes upon the drug dealer, how much more severe the judgment of God upon those who convince others to do drugs or to drink and be drunk. Woe to you who make your neighbors drink. Who makes your venom even to make them drunk so as to look on their nakedness. So you want to take advantage of your neighbor. This, by the way, is a prophecy, again, against Babylon. Against Babylon and its king. Making their neighbors drunk so as to look on their nakedness. But ultimately, God says, you will be filled with disgrace rather than glory. Now, you yourself, drink. Drink and expose your own nakedness. The cup of Yahweh's right hand will come around to you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. For the violence done to Lebanon will cover you, and the devastation of its beast by which you terrified them because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. The poisoner, that's what this third woe is pronounced against. And then there's a fourth word. Verse 18, what profit is the graven image when its maker has engraved it, or a molten image, a teacher of lies? For its maker trusts in his own making, when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him, woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, and to a mute stone, arise. And that is your teacher? Behold, it's overlaid with gold and silver, and there's no breath at all inside it, but Yahweh is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Yahweh is in his holy temple. So woe to you, idolaters. That's the fourth one. Woe to you who actually pray to something that you've made. You might as well be praying to yourselves, is his point. There's one more thing. One more thing that we must go back and make much of. And I know I'm already at almost 19 minutes. When he begins in verse 4 with this contrasting statement, behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. That one statement, the righteous will live by his faith, becomes a theme for the New Testament. You know this, right? It is proclaimed as a standalone statement apart from all the rest of this prophecy against Babylon, both in Romans, in Galatians, and in Hebrews, which, when you consider, I personally believe that the author of Hebrews is the same apostle, Paul, it then would become sort of the core. It's the core. It's like the foundation of the gospel that Paul preaches. The just shall live by faith. It's by faith and by faith alone. By God's grace, we are saved through faith, not of works. Not of works, The just shall live by faith. Paul preached it to the Romans, Romans chapter 1, to the Galatians, and I think chapter 3, in Hebrews in the 10th chapter. I maintain Paul as the author, and I say again, no one else had a good reason to leave their name off of the epistle that is addressed to the Hebrews. And I know the scholarly guys will tell you, as they have told me, that if I knew the native language better, if I understood the language, Greek, that these epistles were written in, then I would really have a deeper appreciation for how different the style is. I recognize that, and I don't disagree with that. However, how different the audience is. All of Paul's other epistles are written to Gentile believers, Gentile churches established in Asia Minor. That one letter, written to his own people, I would expect it to be different. Anyway, I guess I don't really need to make the case, do I? I don't really need to, because the Holy Spirit of God inspired the holy author, and he wrote as the Spirit of God gave him utterance, as he was moved upon by the Holy Spirit to tell us, just shall live by faith. That, my friends, again, at the core of the gospel, foundational truth. It's by faith, it's not by works. The just shall live by faith. Faith. The just shall live by faith, and not only that, my friends, I have had much to say to this particular generation about how the just live by faith. We don't live by what we feel. We cannot. I don't care, even if you're a woman, you cannot live at the mercy of your feelings. You cannot live based on how you feel. You must live based on what is true. Faith in God, faith in what God has said, faith in his word. And where does faith come from? Romans 10:17. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. All right, there's your study for today, and I went a little over 20 minutes. I try to keep these under 20, but we'll continue, the Lord willing, tomorrow with a third chapter. Grace and peace to you all.